Loaded show here at Dolphins Today by Chad Sports. I am Nick Roloff. We have a lot of news to react to, one of them being the future of Tyreek Hill. I think it was just revealed by something another team in the NFL did. We'll discuss about that. Plus a trade target for the Miami Dolphins off of the board. Where could Miami pivot at that specific position? But we're going to get into Tyreek Hill first, and it all starts with what the New York Jets did early yesterday, releasing Davante Adams. Obviously, they traded for him before the deadline. Third-round pick. Could have jumped up to a second if they met certain requirements. Did not. He ultimately is off of the roster. Not even 7 months later. A disaster in there. And there's a couple reasons to me why this is impactful for the Dolphins. One, from a positive lens, Davante Adams is no longer inside the division, because when you played the Jets down the stretch last year, he actually played pretty well against you. He torched Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey in what I thought was the best game of the season for the Jets offense in that, week 14, week 15 game in Miami where the Jets offense put up like 28 points and Aaron Rodgers threw for 300 yards. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this in relation to Miami is because what happened today in terms of the Jets releasing Davante Adams to save themselves $29 million in cap space is exactly what will happen to Tyreek Hill next year. Because Tyreek Hill's contract is just so proportioned, if you will. Now, that was by design from Chris Grier and the Dolphins to push cap space down the road to help them try to build a roster in 23 and 24 that they believed could compete for a Super Bowl. This year, his cap hit is $28.6 million. That's honestly not too bad for a top 5, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL at this point, so I'm not fretting about that. But in 2026, his cap hit is $51.8 million with a $30 million base. That's the final year of his contract. I want it to be abundantly clear for the Dolphins fans watching this on March 4th or March 5th, 2025. There is absolutely no world where Tyreek Hill is wearing a Miami Dolphins uniform and on the football field playing on that price tag in 2026. $51.8 million is what a top-tier quarterback's cap hit is. Not a 32, not a 33-year-old wide receiver. I know Tyreek Hill is arguably a top 3, top 5 wide receiver in Dolphins history in the short time he's been here, but there's no chance he should be allowed and will be allowed to play on that cap number in 2026. So the obvious thing is that the Dolphins ultimately either trade him or cut him. And I want to ask you, before I give you my official thoughts on the matter, will the Dolphins cut Tyreek Hill next year? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know if you think Miami ultimately releases Tyreek Hill following this season. Get your thoughts down in the comment section. Well, I think they will if they do not trade him. And I sent this tweet out yesterday on March 4th that the Dolphins should trade Tyreek Hill at the NFL trade deadline if they are underachieving like they did in 2024. Why? It's because they're going to be forced to cut Tyreek Hill in 2026, or at least before the season in 2026. So if you could get a 5th, a 6th round pick back at the trade deadline rather than just losing him for nothing and creating cap space, which you'd be able to do anyway, then you should absolutely try to do that. Because if you think about what Miami would be getting in return for Tyreek Hill if they released him, it's quite a lot. Miami does not have a lot of cap space already in 2026. I believe they're actually already projected to be over the cap in 2026, and we haven't even signed any 2025 free agents yet. But the Dolphins releasing Tyreek Hill after this upcoming season in the 26 offseason, pre-June 1st, so before free agency begins in 26, would save Miami $36.3 million. The dead cap hit for Tyreek Hill next year would only be $15.5 million. And I know it sounds terrible to be paying a player $15.5 million not to play for you, but the savings of $36.3 million will just be too good to pass up, similar to what happened with Davante Adams and the New York Jets, which is why, to me, I believe this is the final year that Tyreek Hill plays in a Dolphins uniform. Hill had a great career for the Miami Dolphins. There's no question about that. Entering his final season here as the fourth year in Miami, he's put up 4,400 yards, 26 touchdowns in 50 games. He's been absolutely terrific. 1,700 yards in back-to-back years, and would have had another 1,000-yard season in 2024 if it wasn't for Tua only playing 11 games and getting injured. I appreciate Tyreek Hill for the good seasons. It was awesome to have what you could consider the top wide receiver in all football playing for the Dolphins in 2022, in 2023. I think the trade that Chris Grier made to acquire Hill and the contract he gave him was justified. It was worth it. I know it did not result in a Super Bowl yet a playoff win, but Tyreek Hill was everything the Dolphins could have thought him to be when they made that trade, and it's unfortunate that he is going to have to end his Dolphins tenure the way it will ultimately go down. I know I'm speaking in absolutes right now, but it's just the way I see things happening. There's just no way to me this ends any other way than what happened today with Davante Adams and the New York Jets, where he got released. All right, we're going to transition from Tyreek Hill to talking about a Dolphins trade target who came off the board because he actually got traded by a different team. But before we get into all of that, I do want to give some major love to Prize Picks, the sponsor on today's show. I play Prize Picks every single day. It's so easy. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections, and you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks, you could play daily. You could play season long. Basketball, hockey, golf, baseball's around the corner. You could already put in some season-long projections on football as well. And when you get correct entries and picks, safe and secure withdrawals are Prize Picks specialty. You get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. I put in a 3-player entry for the football season ahead of us here. I go 3 less than Jared Goff, 4,200 passing yards, less than Travis Kelce, 774.5 receiving yards, and less than Jaden Daniels, 824.5 rushing yards. Going 3-player entry here. They also offer weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where you can get select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. All right, let's get over to the next news here, and it has to do with a trade. The Rams traded offensive lineman Jonah Jackson to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a 2025 6th-round pick. They mentioned the trade can't be processed until the league year actually begins on March 12th. But this is kind of a bummer, in my opinion, because when you look at Jonah Jackson, which we discussed him last week as a potential trade target for the Dolphins after it was reported that he will be made available on the trade market, I said I'd be interested in him. He could play left guard. He could play right guard, a big-time position of need for the Miami Dolphins. Only has a base salary of $9 million this season, has a $17 million cap hit next year, but you could lower that by extending him or moving off of him prior to the 2026 season. And if you only had to offer a 6th-round pick in this year's draft, that would have been very valuable, in my opinion, and it would have been a really good buy low move by Chris Grier. The Dolphins have 2 5th-round picks. They have 3 7th-round picks heading into the NFL draft. No 6th-rounders, but they could offer 2 7ths. They could have offered 1 5th, which would have obviously topped the Bears' offer. To me, this was a trade that I would have made because it would have slotted in a starting left guard, and you would have went into free agency already knowing that you have one of your guard spots kind of filled out, and you only needed to sign one or draft one to be your starting right guard. we'll talk about what happens next for Miami at the guard spot. But make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Can we get to 67,700 subscribers on today's show? We are 58 away. I think we can. Hit that sub button, join the channel, because we will have you covered with every single piece of Dolphins news and rumors over the next week and a half with free agency looming. Well, with Jonah Jackson not being targeted in a trade, here are the top 8 free agent targets that I think the Dolphins may go after on the offensive line. We've shown this graphic quite a bit in this offseason, talking about Will Fries, James Daniels, Aaron Banks, Mekhi Becton, but we haven't really talked about some other names like Will Hernandez, Patrick McCarry, Tevin Jenkins, and Kevin Zeitler. I think those 4 can all be options for Miami. I also think another sneaky option could be Brandon Scherff from the Jacksonville Jaguars, cheap potential 1-year cheap contract guy that ultimately is a mentor to a rookie you take on day 2 of the NFL draft potentially. The one thing is abundantly clear. The Miami Dolphins absolutely need to address offensive line and free agency. And if he doesn't, referring to Chris Grier, I might have to fly to Miami, find his office, and start a riot with pitchforks and signs outside of his office, because enough is enough neglecting the offensive line. That was a list of 8 players that would be major upgrades over what Miami started last year in Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg. If you sign 2 of those 8 guys, I will be jumping for joy. And I will be very happy with what Chris Grier did in free agency. You sign 1 and then plan on doing 1 in the draft, I'll be okay with that. You sign none of those 8 guys, and like I mentioned, I'm going with pitchforks and burning flames to Chris Grier's office. But I also wanted to mention some offensive line draft targets for Miami, assuming the Dolphins don't ultimately sign 2 from that list of 8, because if we were going to be honest, I know Miami, and they're probably not going to. These 5 are the best 5, I think, offensive guards potentially for Miami in the draft. Will Campbell, after the way he was able to test at the combine, is probably viewed more as a guard rather than a tackle and might slip down boards to where Miami could snatch him at 13. Calvin Banks Jr., I would anticipate him being available at 13. I also think he tested like a guard and is an option for the Dolphins, similar offensive scheme from Steve Sarkisian in Texas. Gray Zabel's an intriguing name. That's a late first-rounder, early second-round name. Same thing for Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. And then Jonas Savaina, hopefully I said that somewhat right, probably not. He is a second-round target for the Dolphins on the interior offensive line. But you may be thinking, Nick, why is Tyler Booker not on your interior offensive line draft targets list? I do not think Tyler Booker will actually be on Chris Grier's draft board when things are all said and done heading into late April's draft. Tyler Booker, who is viewed as maybe the top peer offensive guard in this draft, did not test well at the NFL Combine. He did not show good athleticism, some speed. His 10-yard split wasn't good. 40-yard dash was not good for someone of his size. And we know Chris Grier and this Dolphins scheme requires you to be athletic, be able to get out in the perimeter, and in a zone run blocking scheme. And because Chris Grier does not value guards as much as tackles, and Booker is not an athlete for his position, I do not think that Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel will target Tyler Booker at all with pick number 13. And if they are not targeting him at 13, well, then they will not draft him. So to me, I think you could take Tyler Booker off your boards. I don't think there's any chance the Dolphins draft him. But you guys let me know your thoughts on the matter. Will Tyler Booker be on Chris Grier's draft board in late April? If you think he remains on, type on. If you think he remains off, type off. I think he's off, man. I like Booker as a player. I like his physical nature. I like his mentality. Just I know what the Dolphins like in an offensive line. Tyler Booker is the opposite of that. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel, because whether it's draft news, draft rumors, free agency content, we will have you covered. And as free agency gets underway on Monday, March 10th, make sure you subscribe and have your notifications turned on, because there will be fireworks and we'll cover it all here at the channel.